The COVID-19 pandemic has been a constant reason for worry for many of us. Many of us are looking for answers to some of the most pressing questions centered around the pandemic. Here's introducing a brand new series, Bounce Forward, where we bring to you stories of truth, facts, and resilience. Here, we break up the most complex issues into the simplest explanations and help you understand and comprehend COVID-19.
Hi everyone. We'll be discussing children during the pandemic, and we have with us Senthil from APD, Sonali from Sesame, and Deepa from CSI. So I will just quickly dive into the questions. What do you think the future of education looks like? Could the shift to digital negatively impact mental health of children and curb their development? Or could it also lead to digitizing, which helps bridging the rural-urban gap and gender divide in education with easily accessible educational resources?
So I think this is a pretty loaded question. To just say that, as working with young children, it's very critical that they have experiential learning. So there can be nothing to replace that. We can't put a child in front of a screen and expect that child to develop all the kinds of faculties and all sides of their personality. So it's very important to understand that it can be digitally enabled, but never digitally led. So that's the first point. The other thing I want to talk about, and I think Deepa also mentioned it, that there is generally a gender divide and rural-urban, and there is an economic lens to access to digital. So I think it is important that we resolve the access question. And it also is important how we are teaching online. It cannot be that we can replicate a classroom experience. It is a very different experience. So if we really think of using digital to its optimum, then we have to recraft how those lessons are taught in digital. We now quickly responded and tried hard to sort of create a classroom scenario, but that's not how it will and should operate. It needs to be rethought if we want to go ahead with digital. And the last point I'd like to make is the role of parents. That has become supremely critical. Parents can't outsource learning and all these aspects to schools and digital devices. They have to engage. So how for us, parents will use digital to educate and learn, and therefore then help their child. It cannot be that children are left to use digital as they choose. It needs an interface, and this could be parents and or teachers. And both parents and teachers have to also be educated how to use digital to really help children.
Thank you so much, Sonali. Deepa, would you also like to answer this question?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Sonali has said, but I also say that the blended learning would be the future. The online classes that have come in now are going to stay, but then teachers and parents will have to use it judiciously, because we have seen there are certain advantages of digital learning, and at the same time we have seen that how this digitization that was forced upon us brought all these gender divides and all this divide between rural and urban so clearly. So we will have to be very careful, but we all know that this blended learning is going to stay. So government will also have to make a lot of effort to make this high-speed internet and then these affordable gadgets available to all. And at the same time, teachers and parents will have to be really judicious, because we all know that we cannot be having children sitting in front of screens and as Sonali rightly said, grasping all the aspects. We are not only talking about cognitive development of children, we are also talking about their socio-emotional development, and that can only happen when they interact with others, when they meet others, and then they learn. And another thing that is going to come in our education system is training of teachers. There'll be change in the training of teachers, because earlier the training of teachers was focused mainly on pedagogy, but now the focus will also be on training our teachers on use of technology and using various tools to make their education more effective and more engaging. And another aspect is what we spoke about earlier. Teachers also need to be train more on providing psychosocial support to the students, which was not a focus earlier. So I feel these are some of the changes that are going to come in our education system now, with our experience of the entire experience of pandemic and this online teaching.
Thank you, Deepa. Senthil, would you like to take this as well?
The statistics says that there are nearly 8 million children with disabilities in India. And if you look into the statistics of the special educators, they constitute only 1.35% of the total teacher strength. So there is a wide gap between special educators need in India. So if you talk about that, it's very difficult. So that is one thing which we need to think about, increasing more number of special educators or rehab experts in the front field first. And second is that when it comes to a child with special needs, another thing is that tailoring the individual educational plan is something which is very much important. You cannot actually make a kind of like an able-bodied how we teach in a group. That is not really possible when it comes to disability child. And the third part is that I feel like we need to have an integrated legal framework with certain norms and standards. Though you say that the Right to Education Act has been established in the year 2009, some of the norms and standards have not been set in terms of school infrastructure or the curriculum or empowerment of teachers. So that should become a mandate for all schools, so that at least in future that could happen. And fourth, I feel that there should be an integrated convergence cell across the ministries, because when it comes to disability, health stands alone, women and child stands alone, and education stands alone. There should be a convergence should happen. Then only, like, whenever policies we have been able to implement, it will actually able to be executed very well. Unless and until the conversion happens, it will not happen. And final thing I would like to say is that when you talk about technologies, again, there should be a mixture of technologies. Where actually, like as I initially mentioned, it's not only about the synchronized and asynchronized modes of online teaching using mobile technology. Other than that, there should also be, very recently, there are so many things have been launched, particularly for rural focus, like in TVs and radios and printed materials and so on, should be the other sources where we can rely on, particularly when you want to educate a rural child and again a child with a disability at the last mile. So these are some of my recommendations.
Thank you so much, Senthil. So we were also wondering about the impact of all of this on child marriage and child labor issues in India, what the past has been, and the cases, it has increased a lot significantly. So what do you think can be the way forward there?
So, Tanya, I've worked quite a lot on the issue of early and child marriage, and we know there are several reasons why this has transpired, and a lot of it is to also do with social norms, and also economic status of parents. So I think there are a lot of in sort of stories and data sets that we are looking at now more recently, and there is a lot of prediction that early marriage is going to go up because of the reasons we all understand, that families are at high risk and girls are particularly at high risk, and this is going to be a big problem to handle. Saying that, I think it is a time we need to sort of link it back to trying and keeping girls in school. We really need to open schools rapidly. I think a lot of the educational sector is making a lot of noise to say that we should open educational institutions as soon as possible. And I think Deepa also raised this point early enough, that there's a whole gender side to this conversation. So we need to get the girls back into school as urgently as possible. We need to make parents realize that a lot of attention needs to be paid to girls at this point of time. And that is very, very key.
Thank you so much, Sonali. Thank you. Deepa, would you also like to answer this?
Yeah, and as Sonali has said, that we are all seeing a lot of girls who are at home, the workload of sibling care and the workload of domestic chores also increased on the girls, and they were not able to attend the online classes because of that also. Online classes or whatever worksheets they were getting. So in the communities where we have been working, we've also been emphasizing this again and again, that you need to pay more, you need to pay more focus on the education of your girls also. And we're all realizing that because of the migration that has happened, many of the families who have gone back to the villages, so that is also going to lead to increase in child marriages. because girls have already missed almost 2 years of the school education. So the parents are feeling that, okay, they've already missed it. And one of the interesting thing that many of the people in my staff were telling, that it's not only the migration of the families, many of the single men in the first lockdown, many people moved back to the villages, and they said this is the time when marriages are happening more, because all these single men, because of the shutdown in the cities, they also moved back to the villages. So this is also one of the reasons, because girls were free, they were not getting educated, and all these people moved to the villages. So that also led to increase in child marriages. So now it's very critical for all of us to ensure, now when the schools are opening, to ensure what was the enrollment rate and how many girls are still out of the schools. We'll in fact have to do, it's like a census level, you can say, we have to do that kind of an effort to ensure that all the kids come back to the school, not only the girls, but also the kids who have been engaged in child labor. We all know that the livelihoods have been impacted, and in many families, kids were working, and in many of the families where kids were not working, they have also now been forced to work. So that kind of an effort needs to be taken up, census level effort. The teachers have been doing census, but now they have to do this kind of an effort for their own school, for their own students, if we have to really ensure that we don't see the kind of dropouts that are being predicted.
Thank you so much, Deepa. Building on that, I'd also like to ask, what do you think with this sudden drop in education, would it also impact child labor and crime rates going forward in the next few years?
I think this is a very important question, Tanya, to be linked to the quality of human resource in the country. We've already sort of extensively understood that even pre-COVID, the learning levels are not at par with the age and the grade. So I think we've been looking at ASER data year on year, and already we were seeing children not being able to cope up with the class they are on. So now can you imagine the magnitude of the problem we are looking at in terms of learning levels? Now, how does this link to the skilling? So what will happen in, say, 5 to 10 years? What is the kind of workforce that we will be looking at in terms of the skill base of that workforce? Are we going to be looking at a lower level of skills, and in a country which is rapidly growing and wants to be developed, we need the higher level of skills. So we are first facing that problem. How do we equip the next generations to come with knowledge and with skills? So you're very right. In a way, it is going to add to our employment and livelihood problems in a very dramatic way in terms of the skill levels. And I think that's the linkage I want to make first and foremost. When you say unemployment, it's a very broad term. You can have employment in many ways, but is that really going to add to the family opportunities, value to the family, value to the person, or one is just performing low skill jobs? So I think it's a very loaded question. Increasing crime rates, I think that's again a big worry, because there is crime that is reported and there's crime that is unreported. When you look at crime against family members, is it just that when you say crime rate means someone taking someone's property or theft and robbery? What are we looking at? Or is it looking at abuse and violence? We all saw during the lockdown, a lot of cases on violence and abuse has gone up. And that has been incremental. Childline has reported it. There has been a huge jump in that kind of violence anyway. So I think this kind of violence is directly and indirectly linked with the question at hand. And we have to sort of break it down a little bit more to understand, when we say crime rate, what is the crime rate? Crime rate against women and girls and children has already gone up.
Thank you so much, Sonali. Senthil, Deepa, would any of you like to take this as well?
Yeah, same goes in terms of people and as well as children with disabilities. And we are actually running a disability law unit for the 5 states of South India, where we also understand that the violence against children as well as people with disabilities have been increasing more. And again, there is a kind of a neglect and denial of their services and denial of schemes is also happening in a higher rate when it comes to people with disabilities, is what we understand. during the pandemic period.
Thank you so much, Senthil. This brings me to my last question. Would we, as a collaborative and organizations working with children do we need to focus on bringing vocational skill development on priority in the future?
Sesame works with really young children, so we don't talk vocational skill at this stage really. We are really focusing on executive functions. We are focusing on and what does that executive function means? Problem solving, lateral thinking, creative thinking. These are critical skills that children need to learn so that later on it helps them to the larger question you're asking. And in our curriculum, in our system, how much of recognition is there on developing these kinds of skills? The recent national education policy has put a lot of focus on executive skills. And if I was to sort of really applaud the policy from that perspective, I think we are seeing a definite focus on early years, 3 to 8. We're looking at a focus on skills, and these are executive skills, which are so essential to move away from rote-based learning. It is absolutely essential. Now, Nipun is also focusing on the same. So I hope that those are the guidelines that get actually implemented in the curriculum so that we very early on equip children with adequate support and skill building that will stand them for life. And that's where I think the attention should be.
Thank you, Sonali. Deepa, would you also like to answer this as well?
Yeah, I feel that earlier when we were doing employability skill training programs, we used to have you can say one paper or one focus was on workplace readiness. So what Sonali is saying, we were teaching these youth workplace readiness at an age when they were already 18 plus. And that is not the time when you can inculcate those values in them of being punctual, completing things, decision making. So these are the life skills that need to be inculcated in children right from the childhood. And I totally agree that if national education policy is now going to focus on that, that is the kind of focus we need. And I believe it is something that has been missing in our country for years, because whenever we used to interact with people or we used to go abroad, we used to say we miss out on some of these basic work values. So these work values, I think, need to be integrated right from the beginning, and our focus should be that. And as you said, that do we need to focus on vocational skills? I think government has enough focus on all these skill trainings and vocational skills, and there is enough focus on that. And right from the childhood, I think we need to focus on life skills, which is missing in our curricula.
Thank you so much, Deepa. Senthil, would you also like to take this up?
Yeah, actually, like when it comes to child with disabilities, I feel like there should be a blended curriculum. When I say a blended curriculum, I can say that it's not about only education, but also other things like there should be that's what we practice when we talk about inclusive schooling, where rehabilitation also become part of it. And in addition to that, even vocational skilling at some point of time, when they come to the secondary level education, that becomes a part of it, where actually they will also start to learn one additional skill, which could actually either take them to a higher education, or it could actually pave a way for their livelihood in future. That's what usually most of the organization and we also start to believe in when it comes to educating a child with a disability. So vocational skilling is important. At one point of time, we need to introduce based on the IQ and then the capacity of the child to either to go to an higher stream or to choose a livelihood opportunities for them for the independence. So a blended curriculum would be an ideal curriculum when it comes to child with a disability, is my opinion.
Thank you so much, Senthil. Thank you everyone for taking the time out today and participating in this conversation. It was really interesting having everyone here.
Thank you for watching the Bounce Forward series, brought to you by the COVID Action Collab. Bounce Forward brings to you stories and insights that have not been spoken about in enough detail and provides solutions along with relevant data to back them up. Like, share, subscribe to our content to get regular updates on all things COVID-19.